Greetings, colleagues and friends. Kambria Evans here, the Teaching and Learning EMDR consultant. And y'all know, if you've been with me for a while, that we started this podcast back in May of 2020 for all of the EMDR clinicians that were supposed to figure out how to do virtual EMDR for the first time during a pandemic. And it was such a lovely, lovely, adventurous ride. We went on together those several years, figuring things out around how to structure our practices, how to do virtual EMDR, how to think with our clinical reasoning brain when it comes to treatment planning, and understanding how we can utilize EMDR to help our clients who are in crisis now in the pandemic, who are being triggered by their old trauma and old stories. And I just want to say that is all going to still happen. I am still going to be loving on and teaching and reflecting with my EMDR clinicians. What's going to be a little bit different is something that has been bubbling up inside of me, which is that I've been on this mission for the last several years around how to help EMDR clinicians help their clients. And I feel very motivated and very called to now speak to everybody. I'll be speaking to EMDR therapists, I'll be speaking to therapists, and I'm just going to be speaking to everybody who's curious about how to make their therapeutic experience smarter, how to make their therapeutic experience more customized for them, right? Because y'all know me, there is no one size fits all. It's not a real idea. And I want clients to feel empowered in their therapy, right? I don't want the therapeutic relationship to be a repetition of their past relational experiences where they are told what to do, told that, I know everything and you just follow my lead. That's really hard for a lot of people. It's not really treating them like an adult. And I have been preaching this with you guys, you therapists, for a long time. And I want clients of therapy to hear this so that they can understand how to access care, how to be an advocate for themselves in their therapeutic process, how to collaborate on their treatment planning, what outcomes they can expect, how to respond when their therapist says things that might be confusing for them. I really want to pull back the curtain on how I think therapy can work for everybody. So I'm hoping that the therapists listening and the EMDR therapists listening will feel free to adopt my point of view and my language. So when you're speaking to potential clients, when you're speaking to your current clients about their treatment planning, about their goals, about the way that they want to work, the way that they want to do therapy that works for them, instead of squishing them into some kind of protocol or box, I'm hoping that you can take this framework and just have this be what's normal. And I feel called to do this because this is not the norm, right? The norm is, I'm a therapist, I'm highly trained, I have a protocol, everyone's going to follow it, I'm going to follow it, the client's going to follow it. And if something doesn't work in the therapeutic process, then someone's doing something wrong, right? The therapist isn't doing it right because the therapist doesn't know enough, or they're not being attuned enough. Something's wrong. There's an enoughness problem, right? I'm not smart enough, I'm not capable enough. Or the client's doing something wrong. Right? I actually had a supervisor say to me years ago, as I was presenting a case for consultation, well, you don't really have a client. And that stuck with me for years. And I thought, I do have a client. We just need to be flexible and creative about how this specific client gets to experience therapy with me, right? So I want to bring flexibility, creativity, empowerment to both clinicians and clients, right? Because if everyone feels empowered, only good things are going to happen, y'all. Only good things, okay? I just think everyone deserves to understand themselves and have therapy on their terms. So this is going to be the mission for the podcast moving forward. I hope that y'all are excited about this. I'm very excited about this. I'm excited to take what I've been saying in my EMDR consultation groups out into the public for everyone to consume. I'm excited for people to understand themselves better. That just feels like the biggest gift I can give people right now, especially after the pandemic, as people are trying to redesign their life, right? I've been going through a huge life redesign the last 9 months. And it's interesting, isn't it? How we are all doing these life experiments to figure out what feels good. And it's a really beautiful time for people to be going to therapy. So let's dive in. Okay. So first, this will be a series around kind of understanding EMDR. And first, I want us to think about, what is EMDR, right? Now, if you Google this question, you'll probably get lots of scientific articles about the efficacy of EMDR in terms of treatment outcomes. You'll probably learn about bilateral stimulation, right? Like right side, left side, either with tactile buzzers or doing eye movements back and forth. You'll learn about all the 8 phases of EMDR, but these are questions and answers that don't really go as deep as I want to go today, okay? So I'm not going to give you the cookie cutter answer because I don't know that that's necessarily helpful for the purposes of what we're trying to achieve together. So if you had asked me in the 80s what EMDR was, I would have said, it's this amazing thing that Francine Shapiro discovered when she was walking in the woods, right? Her feet were doing right side, left side bilateral stimulation. And she noticed that when she moved her eyes back and forth and thought about disturbing content, the disturbance of the content desensitized and went down. And thus EMDR was born, right? That's the fairy tale or the story from the 80s with Francine Shapiro, right? Beautiful story. I love it. Now, if you ask me this question now in 2023, right? Almost, 50 years later, I have a different answer, right? We know about taxing the working memory, right? With all the research coming out of the Netherlands with EMDR 2.0, we know that, y'all, you don't even need eye movements, okay? You just have to give your body a task or 2 or 3 to do at once, right? In order for you to desensitize something disturbing, okay? Like, how amazing is that we know that now, that there's research that supports that now, right? If you ask an exposure therapist what EMDR is, they're just going to say, it's just looking at something and exposing yourself to it and desensitizing it, right? If you ask a CBT therapist, right, cognitive behavioral therapy, what is EMDR? They're going to say, oh, it's taking a bunch of thoughts and beliefs that are negative or disturbing and changing them into something positive, right? And if we go deeper into this taxing the working memory theory, right, I like to think about this, understanding this as kind of like thinking about colors, right? If you have the color blue, and let's say blue represents something disturbing to you, like a car accident, okay? That has disturbance for you now when you think about it. You cannot hold blue in your mind, right? And simultaneously do red. Red might be coloring loops on a page or walking around or tapping your feet or doing tactile buzzers back and forth or eye movements. It is challenging to do a working memory task while thinking about something disturbing and not have the disturbance eventually go down. If you add several working memory tasks, like we're seeing with EMDR 2.0, right? It's almost impossible. So it's almost, what I'm saying is it's hard to keep blue the way it is if we introduce red, right? We're going to get purple. Purple is a different form of whatever blue was, right? So we're consciously focusing on 2 different things and neutralizing something, or we're mixing something disturbing with something positive to give us a different association in our bodies and our brains about something disturbing. It's amazing, right? And what's interesting is that, taxing the working memory actually was something that was talked about in the 70s, right? Before Francine Shapiro. So EMDR is much more than eye movements. It's much more than CBT, exposure therapy. It's much more than taxing the working memory, right? And guess what? Everybody's right. Everybody is describing the same part of the elephant, right? Everyone's correct that EMDR is all of these things. And with the utmost respect, I would like to tell you where I think we are getting EMDR so very wrong. And I say this because I think that EMDR has a branding crisis, okay? Now, I am not in the marketing field, and I never have been, right? But I, as a therapist, understand that the way we talk about something is either going to invite someone in to try it or experience it, or it's not, right? Now, I don't have to be a marketing executive or an advertising executive to know that this is real, because I have 6-year-old twins. And every single day, I am tasked with figuring out how to brand something so that they will try it or do it, okay? Oh, you parents know what I'm talking about. So EMDR has a branding crisis. What do I mean by that, right? If I had a farm, I would bet it that 9 out of 10 therapists who identify themselves as trauma therapists or do EMDR or EMDR-informed things like art or brain spotting will say, I'm a trauma therapist, and we are going to work on your trauma. For some people, this is an invitation that works for them, okay? But as an EMDR consultant, having taught multiple consultation groups and heard many clinical cases for many, many, many years and had, over 10,000 EMDR sessions myself in my office here in California, y'all, we can do better than this, okay? If you don't do EMDR as a therapist and you say, come work on your trauma, this message is for you as well, okay? If you're a client who's in therapy or thinking about doing therapy on something that's disturbing to you, I want you to take this in, okay? Because trauma therapy or EMDR or brain, it's not working on your trauma, okay? It's so much more than that. And I would like to take this opportunity for us to do a rebrand, okay? And I'm going to pitch it to you. And hopefully you can take whatever is helpful and use it in your life, use it in the world, and do great things, okay? So let's just think about when we say like working on your trauma, okay? Now, if I'm trying to get my kids to resolve something painful, like let's say they have a cavity, which by the way, they did because during COVID, we didn't go to the dentist for like a year and a half, okay? I'm not going to say to them, hey, come with me in the car. We're going to drill down your tooth to fix your pain. Okay. I'm going to be more creative about how I help them help themselves to get there. Okay. Okay. So trauma, we love using that word as therapists. Trauma is something that happened or didn't happen, but should have. Okay. Now, you're not working on the trauma, okay? You're not resolving the trauma. I want us to stop saying that. And I'm going to mess up too. Like I'm so ingrained to say this. I'm reprogramming my own language as well with you, okay? So I want us to talk instead about learning, because from the time we are little, there is a normalization of learning. Like we all go to school and we all want to learn things and we all want to believe that learning is going to help us. Okay. So I would like for us to think about therapy, whether it's EMDR or brain spotting, whatever it is. I'm going to say EMDR a lot because that's what I focus on and specialize in. But I want us to talk about it as this therapy, right? EMDR changes the way you learn. Okay. We're not just changing what you learned or decided, but we're also going to change the way you respond, which we call your adaptations, okay? So let me break all of that jargon down for you, okay? So let's pick an event. Let's say that you are saying, I have disturbance around being bullied as a kid at school, okay? I'm going to label this as traumatic. How do I know that that's true? Because it has disturbance for me now. It is negatively informing how I understand what's happening now, right? It's not informing what's happening now in a helpful way. It's dysregulating me. It's in my body. Maybe I even have like PTSD fragments or flashbacks, right? But when I was bullied, right, in this example, when this person was bullied, something was decided, or maybe multiple things were decided, right? And what we decide when something happens determines whether or not it was traumatic for us. Let me be more clear. If I was bullied as a kid at school and I decided in my 7-year-old brain, I'm being bullied because I'm not good enough, something's wrong with me. I might even throw something in about safety, like I'm not safe, or I can't trust myself. I can't trust other people, right? I could decide a whole bunch of stuff about self, about others, about my sense of control and power in the world, okay? And when I decided this, it might have been true and or felt true at that time, okay? So when we go do therapy now about what's happened before, about what was decided before from a different brain than we have now, right? You're actually working on what you decided because of the event or the relationship about yourself and the world. Make sense? Beautiful. Okay. The second part of this, if you're working with a skilled therapist, they will understand this, is that you're not just working on what you learned or decided around that event or time. You're also working on the adaptations you created to deal with the event and what you decided it meant. Let me give you another example. Let's say I am walking to my car at night in high school from my job at the coffee shop. And on my way to the car, someone approaches me and tries to take my purse. Okay? I might decide I'm not safe, right? I might decide whatever that person looked like, whatever gender or description of their appearance they had, maybe the sweatshirt they were wearing, that's going to trigger not safe, right? I might decide all sorts of things about these pieces that I'm taking in, okay? Or I might decide, as lots of people do who are in these situations, like I did something wrong. I should have had my coworker from the coffee shop walk me to my car. I'm so stupid. This is my fault. That's a very common thing to decide, okay? Now, based on what I decided from that experience, which still has disturbance for me, right? I created adaptations to help me. Every adaptation you have created has a positive intention to help you, okay? Whatever the rules are you have for showing up in the world, whether it's drinking, shopping, sex, like all of these addictions are adaptations, things that help you with what you decided was true. Okay? So let's say now, 30 years later, right? My adaptation is I decided I should have had a coworker walk me to my car. And so every single time I walk to my car, I'm going to have somebody walk with me. Now, somebody might say, well, maybe that's just kind of a good, smart idea. Okay. But if my adaptation is so overdeveloped that I physically can't even leave this office, if I'm by myself to go to my car at night, that is a problem because it is an overdeveloped adaptation that I created in high school, right? Because I decided something about myself and the world. Okay. See how this would trip somebody up, right? This is what we really mean when we talk about working on your trauma. Okay. We're not working on the person approaching me to get my purse. That person's gone. We're working on what I decided about myself and the world and what adaptations I'm using to help me now. Right. And sometimes they're not helpful. Most of the time they're not helpful. And that's why people go to therapy. Okay. Now, therapy does something else that's really cool. That if you are with a skilled therapist, they will understand this and they will know how to do this with you. Okay. So therapy, or EMDR, right, is actually changing, right, how your system, your brain, your body, how you learn now, okay? Because when you do EMDR multiple times, you get this really cool experience of zooming out to see yourself in this process, right? Oh, wow, this thing happened. Here's what I decided. Here's all the creative adaptations that I made to help me never have to experience that again, right? Here's how my adaptations are overdeveloped now, and here's what I want it to look like. You know you can do this. You can see it. You can change it, right? So what happens, and I see this all the time with my EMDR clients, is that, and with my consultees clients as well, after we do a couple of EMDR targets, after we understand what was learned or decided, after we see the adaptations for the helpfulness that they're trying to achieve for you, right? We understand our system, we understand our brain, and we finally feel like we have some ownership in our learning process. Now, why is that important? Well, guess what? I have not found a way to always feel like I'm enough, always feel safe, always feel like I have power and control, always feel like I didn't do something wrong. Like, I have found no way to live like that. I don't know that that's possible because stuff's going to happen, right? Now, sometimes, let's say I get in a car accident, right? And I don't decide anything that makes me get stuck in that, right? I don't decide it was my fault. I don't decide I'm a dumb driver. I don't decide it's not safe to drive, right? The narrative I tell myself, what I decide might be, oh man, that's a bummer. Glad everybody's safe. Okay, these are pretty rare. Figure out with insurance and move forward. It's a bummer, but it's not something that has changed what I've decided about myself or the world, okay? That's why it's not working on the trauma. It's not working on the event. It's working on what happens next, okay? So when we see that our brains and our bodies do this, right, because we've been in therapy doing EMDR, we feel almost excited because now we think, wait a minute, if this is how the process works, I now understand that when something happens to me, I actually in real time now have more of an ability to decide intentionally with all the resources available to me, right? Let's do another example. Let's do an example of a woman who finds out that her husband's cheating on her, okay? Now, if she understands this process I'm talking about, and she has that scaffolding to understand her own system and how her own brain and body work, and she has ownership in it, right? She might decide, oh, I'm not pretty enough. I did something wrong, right? Or she might decide, wow, that's really heartbreaking and his loss. I like myself, okay? Now, she might be able to understand she can decide that close to real time. Is it still a bummer? Is it still heartbreaking? 100%. But she's not changing her sense of self or how she sees the world, right? She's not deciding all men are pigs, never talking to men again, right? She's intentionally choosing what to decide, and what she decides is going to inform whatever adaptations come next to help her enforce what was decided as true or not, okay? So let's talk about learning in terms of curriculum. This is another cool part of EMDR that I love, that I hope you will be excited about if you want to try EMDR, and that as clinicians, we can, EMDR, brain spotting, art, whatever kind of therapy you practice, that you'll be excited for people to understand around this idea of learning and curriculum. Okay, this is one of the coolest things I see with my clients. So when we grow up, we get a curriculum, right? Usually from our primary caregivers. And we just assume that whatever they tell us or show us or model for us, how they respond to us is true, is how life is. Because how could we know any different? There's no way that we could know that, right? So we get our first curriculum from our primary caregivers, okay? Now, then what happens? We take that curriculum that basically outlines Here's all the negative cognitions you're going to have about yourself in the world. Here's all the positive cognitions you're going to have about yourself in the world. Go live your life. Okay, now we're adults operating from this curriculum. And simultaneously, in parallel, as kids and now adults out of our house, we are now getting curriculum from the world. Okay, we have that first curriculum, and now we're getting like advanced topics. Okay, we're getting them from our boss. We're getting them from our peer groups. We're getting them from our coaches, our teachers. We're getting them from our romantic relationships and friendships. And we're taking it in. We're taking it in. Okay, this is learning. I'm learning this. I'm deciding this. I'm creating more adaptations. Oh, look, this curriculum for my relationship with my boyfriend is confirming the curriculum I got with my parents growing up. Okay, I'm going to really double down on that being true. Okay, this is just what we do without even realizing that we're doing it because our brain wants to learn, categorize, and help us. Okay? So here's what's really cool. When people come into therapy, and specifically with EMDR, we really focus on what was learned, right? What's this kind of old narrative, the old curriculum that we've been given, right? And then we get to ask our clients this question. What do you want or need to learn now? Right? And their brains explode. Because what we're realizing is, wait a minute, I got a curriculum. Let me articulate what that was. Now I see it for what it was. But what curriculum did I deserve to have? What curriculum do I want to have now? And by the way, isn't it interesting that growing up and even into my adulthood, I just assumed whoever was teaching me something was what I was supposed to learn. And it's beautiful to see the different ages people decide, I don't agree with your curriculum. I don't want to learn that, right? I'm going to leave this toxic work environment. I'm going to leave this relationship, right? Because what you're teaching me is bullshit. It's total bullshit. And when we realize that, and we realize we can create our own curriculum, our own negative beliefs and positive beliefs about self in the world, the sky's the limit. The sky is the limit because this is the moment we have got a fully integrated sense of self that belongs to us, where we get to decide what we learn, what we don't want to learn, how we rewrite curriculum that, by the way, most of our parents and teachers, right, growing up, they didn't sit down, a lot of them, and say, I wonder what my curriculum's going to be for my... No, they were given a curriculum. They're going to repeat parts of it. Maybe they'll improve parts of it. But it's very rare that someone has really conscious, intentional teachers giving them a consciously constructed curriculum. Okay, it's very rare. When it happens, it's amazing. But just from where I sit, it's very rare. Okay. So now we know that EMDR creates congruence, okay, between the curriculum you want to learn now and what your body still believes is true. Okay? So you get to have a congruence. And to be fair, when you come into therapy and you feel incongruent and you have these different parts saying, well, I'm this or that's normal because you've been exposed to so many different curriculums, right? You have all this evidence to enforce the truth or untruth of what you've been told or experienced in your life. Okay? Beautiful. So as evolved adults, right, we realize that our caregivers were imperfect, our environment is imperfect. So those curriculums were likely unintentional or not even about us, really. And then we get empowered to design our own curriculum of what we want to learn and who we are. Okay? We reflect ourselves back to ourselves. You can do that? Absolutely. And you should do that because that is the safest, most loving thing you can do for yourself. Okay? And when we are that, reflecting ourselves back to ourselves, right? We also are reflecting who we are back to the environment, right? There's agency there. This is who I am. No, thank you. Yes, please, right? So when we create that agency in ourselves, we actually change the world around us, right? When we live in a congruent, intentional curriculum, and we understand that we can decide what we're learning in real time, that's going to take care of our body and our nervous system. People notice that. People notice that and they get curious about it. So your therapeutic process where you are collaborating, owning, deciding what's best for you now, right? The results of that are contagious. They're contagious, right? People notice when someone has a congruent sense of self. Feels really good to be around. Feels really different, okay? And that really, I think, is kind of like full stop, highest level for human actualization, okay? So again, if you're a therapist listening to this, I want you to consider you're not just doing trauma work, okay? It's not about the trauma, right? I want you to stop saying that to people because what you're doing is you're selling them short of what their life could be like for them, okay? And you're not inviting them in, okay? Can you imagine like if someone was like, hey, did something horrible happen to you? Maybe it was once, maybe it was for years growing up. Why don't we come in and focus on that? No, we are not focusing on that. We're focusing on what was decided and the adaptations that were created and what adaptations are needed now to have the experience of ourselves that we want to have in our life, right? We only get one life, as far as I know, and we get to be in it. We get to own our own life. It belongs to us, okay? So I hope this was helpful. Again, I'm going to be doing a series around what is EMDR? How do we explain EMDR to ourselves, to our clients? For people who are thinking about doing EMDR, I hope this helped you get excited about what's possible for you in your life. Because like I said, in this post-COVID, post-pandemic world, so many people are in a beautiful redesign of their lives. And you deserve to be curious about that. So it was wonderful to be with all of you. I will look forward to being curious with you again soon. In the meantime, take care.